So we have our next speaker, Dr. Lakshman Singh Jhala, who's a medical director of Alak Nayan Mandir, Udaipur. And he's got another very interesting video to show us, and let's hear from him. On to you, doctor.
Thank you, madam. Good afternoon to all of you. So now I will be presenting a case. As we all know that IOL opacification is a late but uncommon but a serious complication. So here is a opacified IOL, and the surgery was done 8 years old, and this is a hydrophilic. So here is a case of IOL opacification. As we all know that opacification of IOL is an uncommon but a serious complication of cataract surgery. It can cause significant deterioration of the visual performance and may necessitate IOL opacification. So this is a patient who got operated elsewhere 8 years ago, and we tried to protect the bag or retain the bag, but because it was 8 years old, so there was a lot of epithelial cell growing and a lot of fibrosis of the IOL, and we were unable to take out the IOL and unable to retain the bag. Yes, you can see that we are trying to free the IOL from the bag and retain the posterior capsule in the bag, but we are unable to do that, and we are struggling. And you can see that there is a zonular dialysis also. So we planned to take out in toto the bag with the IOL. In spite of all our efforts, we were unable to separate the bag and the IOL. There are different types of IOL opacification. It's different in the PMM lenses than silicone and hydrophilic. Is very less in hydrophobic IOLs. Of course, there is glistening, but opacification is very rare. Now you can see that we are trying to take out the bag with the IOL, and we have planned for a iris claw lens, which is to be implanted posteriorly or tucked posterior to the iris. So we have planned to, instead of cutting the IOL, we plan, because it has a 5 mm optic of the iris claw lens, so we plan to enlarge the section 5 to 6 mm, and then instead of cutting, we will try to pull out the lens. You can see here that we have made a 6 mm incision. That's the incision, and we have pulled out the lens with the bag. A limited anterior vitrectomy is needed now. So you can see that we are doing anterior vitrectomy. Then putting little bit of pilocarpine, intracameral pilocarpine after the vitrectomy. So that pupil is round and constricted. And now we'll try to implant the iris claw lens. We have three options there, either to put an anterior chamber lens or a iris claw lens being tucked posteriorly or anteriorly, or we can implant a scler fixated IOL. But we are, as an anterior segment, we are comfortable with the iris claw lens, and we have found that it has good results with minimum uveitis and pigment dispersion. You've done very well after doing perfect vitrectomy. You can see that pupil is round. This is a special forceps to hold the optic of the IOL and then put it posteriorly and then tuck the iris on one side. This is the retrofixation of iris claw IOL. So in this type of opacification, the first choice will be to explant the IOL and protect the bag and exchange it with another hydrophobic IOL, but we could not succeed in doing that. So we had to pull out the IOL and the bag, and now you can see that the lens is very well placed and wound was closed with intracameral antibiotic, and patient was 6/12 the very next day, and we are following him. This surgery was done 15 days back only. Thank you very much.
A wonderful video, Dr. Jhala. I showed it, and you showed all those challenges of trying to save the bag and how you had to take your change of decision. My thought was maybe that portion got edited, but when you're doing a vitrectomy, wouldn't you want to close your main wound when you do a vitrectomy?
So this main wound was not closed at that time. It was
Yes.
5 millimeter, but
Yeah.
vitreous prolapse was very less, and ideally we should close the main wound.
Main
Yes.
wound, yes. Dr. Rohit, I want your thoughts on these opacification of IOL. Do you think these happen more with the hydrophobic or the hydrophilic material?
I think they're coming up more with the IOLs which are hydrophilic in nature. And this is what I have observed. But then, these glistenings are there in hydrophobic IOLs as well. The case was perfectly done. I would have, tried to be more, what differently I would have done is that I would have tried to be more discreet, in the sense I would have used a flat spatula to start with and tried. No doubt it was 3 years old surgery. The adhesions are there.
8 years.
Sorry?
8 years old.
8 years old. But still, I would have been more patient, more cautious in breaking the adhesions around the capsular axis all around. And then, with the visco, I would have tried to, expand the bag and try to rotate the IOL if it could have been possible. I would have tried to, by all means, I would have tried to save the bag, and I would have tried to lift the optic and cut the haptics at the optic haptic junction also. And then, by opening up all around, try to put an IOL by exchanging the IOL and put in the other IOL. That would have been my first. But in such a situation wherein such a long period has elapsed, there is no other way out. And I think it was perfectly managed by him.
Actually, sir, this was a Rayner type of hydrophilic lens. So a lot of epithelial cells have grown in between the gap between the haptics, and it was totally fibrosed. So we have also tried a lot, but we could not succeed.
Absolutely. I think it was perfectly done, because if there is no way out, that is the only answer. Absolutely.
As far as anything to add, Dr. Mohan and Dr. Ramurthy?
No, I think you did a good job. But what I would have done is, I would have done all methods to preserve that capsule. One important thing is, because we have reported 26 cases of hydrophilic lenses, a lens called GDR, which is called MDR in the US. Way back in 2002, we have also presented a video called whitewash at that time. These hydrophilic lenses are actually easy to remove. Okay. And you can even actually fold it up, bring it up, and remove it through a very small incision as well. The only problem is, if it's adherent, what I would say is to use a cohesive viscoelastic. Go all round, open up the capsular bag, use a cohesive viscoelastic like Hyalon or even Disco Whisk, which will expand the bag very nicely. And then you will create a cleavage plane between the capsule and the optic of the lens. Another important thing is, if you're not able to do that, as in this case what Jhala did, I will use micro scissors to make small openings in the anterior capsule. The openings will actually open up the anterior capsule a little, relax the anterior capsule a little, and then then you can put viscoelastic and prolapse sometimes the haptics can get adherent. The optic will never get adherent. The optic, you can just, as Rohit rightly said, you can just push the optic up and then cut the optic junction and remove the optic alone, and then put the new lens in the bag. Because nothing like having a lens in the bag or in the sulcus, instead of having a retro-iris fixated or scleral fixation. And anterior vitrectomy, of course, I would have used tricot, definitely, to make sure that the vitreous is removed. Otherwise, everything is fine.
I think I echo what Mohan said and what was said by Rohit also. But very well managed, Jhala. But it's the ultimate outcome which matters, and you got good results. But I would feel that, I'm quite surprised in a hydrophilic lens that adhesions were so dense. Most often you come across in hydrophobic lenses. Usually in hydrophilic, even after years later, you were able to easily separate them and bring out. But then we saw what was happening. And as Rohit said, I would have been a little more gentle in my handling. And sometimes if you are able to insinuate your the iris spatula between the lens and the rexis almost all around. It was the haptic which was absolutely stuck. In these cases, scissors can be used, as Mohan said, or I wouldn't have even hesitated to go with a vitrector and create a small nick under the area of the optic haptic junction. If I'm able to create an area of separation, then it's sometimes in these dense additions impossible to remove the haptics. But then if you cut the optic haptic junction and just remove the optic, and maybe even place a 3-piece lens in the sulcus. And as was observed, I mean, I think in today's world, any vitrectomy done for any reason should be completed with Transilone. That's what gives you an idea that it's complete.
And a PI could be done for an iris clip lens makes a lot more sense because the post-op IOP spikes due to pupillary block would be well addressed. And what would happen now? Normally, glistenings are more common in a hydrophobic, and calcifications are seen more in a hydrophilic lens material. And there have been given explanations because the variable water content and microvacuoles which cause these glistenings. Now, if it is a very long-standing case, do you think that because of the tackiness of a hydrophobic IOL, it might be more stuck to the posterior capsule as against a hydrophilic? So getting a hydrophobic IOL out would be a bigger challenge than a hydrophilic.
Definitely.
100% yes.
Definitely.
100%.
Hydrophobic IOLs are also, they have different subtypes.
Yes.
Some have a lot of tackiness, like Alcon one has, whereas there are others which do not have much. But definitely hydrophobics offer a bigger challenge. No second thought about it.
When there are glistenings on the IOL due to variable reasons, it's not just the IOL material, it's also if the blood aqueous barrier is disturbed in even in diabetics or inflammation and all that. Would you want to go ahead and remove the IOL just because there are glistenings, or would you do it?
I was just about to ask Dr. Jhala, what was the vision in this case? What was the vision?
Pre-op was 624.
Okay, because sometimes, kind of glistenings you see, the patient never complains. You see it only on the slit lamp. And maybe the contrast is low, but if the vision is reasonably good, it's best to leave it alone.
There's a difference between glistenings and opacification.
Yes.
Please, glistenings can be associated with fairly good vision.
Yes.
We have plenty of patients, Acrysoft lenses, good vision. Only thing is the night vision may be affected a little. They may have a little glare, but they don't affect the visual acuity as such.
Yes.
Opacification is the problem.
Yes.
Yes.
Opacification, this was an opaque lens, has to be removed.
I would like to add is, please, when you suspect opacification, don't yak them.
Yes.
Please don't yak, because many people think it's supposed to capsule opacification and yak it.
The lens
Yagging it, you are adding fuel to the flame.
Yes.
Because you are going to have an open posterior capsule when you're going to remove the lens. That's going to have more problems.
Yes.
That's right.
And Dr. Vineet Joshi, are you there? Dr. Vineet?
Yes. Yes.
So you are a cornea guy, so I wanted to ask you this question. Would you ever think a hydrophilic IOL, along with if it has had a DSEC surgery or a DMEC surgery, where there has been an air injection, do you think that these hydrophilic IOLs can calcify? So do you have anything to add on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have seen this, and to support this, there was a case series from UK where they found that when you inject an air bubble, there is certain change in the calcium and.
Yes. Yes. Maybe you should switch off your video. Suddenly we can't hear you. Dr. Vineet?
His network appears to have gone.
Become unsteady. So essentially, if there is an air injection or an intravitreal gas is being used in these corneal procedures, endovitreal procedures, it has been seen that there could be a calcification which occurs. Yes, Vineet, can you talk now? Who is not able to talk? So there could be calcification which is seen more in a hydrophilic lens material. And of course, glistenings, as was earlier said, could be watched if it is not having a visual impact, and though glare could be a bother in some of these eyes. I think I'm sure we lost out on discussions from Dr. Vineet. We shall now go on to our next.
The link is back, ma'am, if you want to.
Yes, Dr. Vineet, you want to add anything?
Yeah, that was the point. I'm sorry, I just lost connection.
Yeah. So you didn't have anything else, no? This is what you had to add, right? Okay.
Yes.